Okay, here we are on air, and let me start. Okay, good morning to everybody watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, also listening to us in Clubhouse. It's a pleasure to deliver to you today's episode of Japan Expert Insights podcast about technology and business in Japan. We have another special guest today, Eric Fraser, whom you know, I'm sure, from LinkedIn and from our previous podcasts here when we have talked about uh, business culture, also transitioning from one place to another, and particularly when it is Japan. Today, though, we are going to talk about something different because Eric recently transitioned into a new field, a field that has been developing at a very fast pace, but that is also controversial to people who are not in it, and maybe to people who are also working in it, because there are a lot of things that we don't know about yet. So today we're going to talk about AI and AI development, and Eric is going to walk us through about the latest trends and also things that we need to watch out for, and things that we need to probably embrace and not resist so much. Well, here with me is Tim Sullivan, whom you know very, very well from, yes, every and each of our podcasts. Yes. So, well, without any further ado, Eric, let's dive into the topic. And of course, we'll have questions, we'll have answers later. But now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Tim. Good to see you again. And thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk about AI, which is currently, I think, one of the most interesting topics in the world to talk about. And partly because there is a mix of very deep fear and very, very excited optimism about it. There's a lot of people who think that it's either the Terminator or the Savior. And it's probably not either of them. I use the word probably because nothing's really certain in AI, especially not the future of how it's going to be used in society. But I thought one thing that almost everyone can probably relate to is the big news story that recently came out about how Google's image generator seemed to be supposedly, too woke, and I'll use that word in but people were very upset that, when you asked for pictures of Vikings, sometimes it gave you, black Vikings. Whether there were black
Right?
Vikings.
Yes.
I laughed. I thought it was hilarious.
But this really upset people. And
Right.
some of those people are just upset because they have political views that are very sensitive, and they don't like the idea of black Vikings. Others, I think, were upset because they felt that this was Google putting their hand on the scale of the AI. And so I think this really highlights some issues about AI's role in society.
Yeah.
There is a mathematical model that generates these images. And that mathematical model, given what it does, is it basically looks at a whole bunch of images, pixel by pixel, and it learns what Vikings look like according to the image base of Vikings in the world today. And so then when someone says, please make a picture of a Viking, it's supposed to go back to that image base and say, well, let's see, what's a Viking? Oh, it's one of these things. Oh, I see, they look like that. And then it generates a picture that's similar to that. Now, were there a lot of pictures of black Vikings in that training data set? Probably not. Should there have been? Who knows? I mean, I think the Vikings were mostly white, but I don't know. I wasn't there. So what people are upset about is they're saying, so you are letting the mathematical model run, but then you are putting your hand on the scale of the output and saying, no, wait, make the Vikings black. And so there is a danger with doing that, which is that you spend all this money building this fantastic mathematical model that you call AI, and then you let some people basically just tweak its output, saying, well, I don't like that output, I'm just going to change the answer. So the issues that this brings up are the training data sets very good data sets? Like, is it good? that most pictures of Vikings are white, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's factually true. But what about when you ask for a picture of a doctor and all you get are older male, people? Is that good? Well, maybe not, because it's important that little girls who want to be doctors see representations of women doctors, for example. So how do you make sure that an AI knows that or understands that it's important to represent certain minority groups in certain roles so that we don't propagate a stereotype? So there's one approach is to work on the training data itself to make sure that there are enough pictures of women doctors in the training data so that when the mathematical model runs, it doesn't just see pictures of older male people as doctors. And then the other approach is to wait until the mathematical model runs, look at its output and say, oh, I don't like that output, I'm just going to change it. It's easier to do the second one, but maybe it's healthier to do the first one. And another analogy that I was thinking of as I was trying to explain this to someone today is, imagine if a car company produced a new model of car and the market said, you know what, those cars are too tall. Like, I can't fit them in my garage. Like, they're just too tall. Now, the car company could redesign the car and rejig all its factories to make the car slightly shorter. Or, as the cars come off the production line, they could send them straight into an industrial press and just flatten them in the press. Right? So that is obviously a dumb way to do it, because you're fiddling with the engineering of the car. Now it's not such a good car anymore. It's just basically been squashed in a press. But you did meet the feedback goal of, let's make the cars shorter. So people are a little bit upset with Google because they feel like they use the industrial press method.
Yeah. I thinking about this. I mean, this is like it's like unpeeling an onion because there's so many ethical and political issues involved in it. And I'm thinking, well, one, I laughed at this because I don't want to cry, but also as somebody who worked in Japanese organizations that really pushed the idea of quality, I'm flabbergasted that they didn't test this well enough to be able to see what was going to happen. Like, and it might be difficult, but to me, it was like, wow, they really released that quickly. Yeah. And then the other thing is listening to you. On the one, I almost see it as a battle between the ideal and, quote, reality. Like, are we reflecting society's ideals, or are we trying to reflect reality? And if you're trying to reflect the ideals, now the question is, well, are your ideals the right one and mine the wrong one? So right. It's very complicated on like policy decisions you have to kind of make to build into the AI structure.
That's right. That's a really good point, because what Google have done is they've seen a social problem, which is underrepresentation of minorities in certain roles in the media. And so they've taken the industrial press approach to that. It's like, as the car comes off the production line, just squash it down with a big industrial press. And that's one way to do it. You end up with a shorter car. But the more complete way to do it is to actually look at what you input into the model to begin with. So what photos are you showing this model? Are they all just photos of old male doctors? Because if you do that, that's what you're going to get when you ask for a picture of a doctor. Now, are there enough photos in the world of young or younger female doctors? Maybe there aren't. Well, guess what? You can actually make some yourself. I mean, that's perfectly doable. You could engineer your data set to reflect what you want it to generate. The other point you made, Tim, is, are you trying to be like a photojournalist, or are you trying to be more creative? Are you trying to reflect what you want society to be, or what it has been for the last 30 years? That's a really important question too. And if you're going to try and reflect a desired standard picking the people who define the desired standard becomes a super important decision, because you're going to give those people a lot of power.
Right.
And we've seen the censorship happening even on like Facebook. They put up a committee and then no matter what they say or what they decide, there's going to be somebody who doesn't agree, who isn't happy. But just to quickly piggyback off your metaphor of using the press to crush the car, to me, that strikes me as a solution completely devoid of any nuance or context. So to me, the question to you, the expert, is there a way to mathematically program in nuance and possibilities and trends of future preferences, even though it might not reflect reality? Like, is there a way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's several ways to do it. One of the most common ways in generative AI right now is to change something called the temperature of the model, which is essentially a way of introducing a little bit more randomness into the output of the model. And so what it does is, what it feels to human observers is that the model becomes more quote unquote creative rather than journalistic. So there's that. There's basically lots of ways to make a model come up with more creative things. I think the issue that Google may have had is that they were probably working under a lot of time pressure. My guess is that whoever was told to release this product was told to do it by a certain date. No questions asked. You must do it. Not negotiable. You better just do it. And so when you put, hardworking, smart people under enough pressure, they will start to take shortcuts.
Yeah, I know.
Tell them that the deadline is non-negotiable. They'll just say, okay, well, I guess I'll just put the car in the press because I don't have the time to redo the whole factory and redesign a shorter car. So you want a shorter car by tomorrow? This is my solution. I'm going to stick that car in an industrial press and I'm going to just take 6 inches off its height.
While I was listening to you, Eric, and then Tim asking you the question, I was thinking that maybe the development of AI, the need, to diversify the data that is input there, and also actually have, create, those different outputs, will make us see, or maybe what I want to say is that we have blind spots. No, what I want to say is that basically, as human beings, we have a lot of blind spots about our own ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And probably this development, and all the blips and the bloppers and everything along the way will actually help us understand our way of thinking better, even, and make us aware of our blind spots and basically make us even better thinkers, or maybe better critical thinkers on the way. So this is one of the unexpected, probably positives that I can find at this point of time about the development of AI and such, I wouldn't call it a failure, what happened with Google and everything, but this is definitely something that we need.
A learning experience for them.
Experience, yes. Yeah.
I agree. I think one of my greatest hopes for AI is that it teaches us more about who we are as people and teaches us more about human nature. One of the things that's already happening is it's telling us that certain data sets that we have are pretty biased. So we know what data sets are fed into the big models. And so when we see them doing things like only showing us men when we ask for CEOs, that tells us, oh, we must have a pretty biased data set here. Why doesn't it ever show us any women as CEOs? Because the data is biased. It only has men in it. So that tells you something about the data and what we've been doing in the last 20 to 30 years. That's valuable to just have a sort of an impartial, emotionless, comment on what our data has in it. And then also, I think as AI gets more and more advanced, I think not only will it be able to do more things that people do, but it will also start to highlight the difference between machines and humans. So the the
And you
boundaries
get to humans.
and machines will actually become quite stark.
Yeah.
As we get closer to the boundary, we'll see it more clearly, and we'll start to realize, oh, so a machine companion will never actually make me feel better.
Mm.
The death of a friend, for example. It could be trained on everything to do with human psychology. It could be better than a human psychologist in terms of knowledge of psychology theory, but it will never actually make me feel better when I've got a depression, case or something very depressing has happened to me.
Yeah, it's almost, it's a tool. So it's not like my wrench makes me feel better, but when I need that wrench, it works for me,
Yeah.
And to Maya's point, you talked about, you're hoping that one promise of AI is it could give us different points. And to, as a kind of metaphor, a simple metaphor of what you're saying, recently I've been working on an original tune, right? And in my head, I have a melody, right? And I was trying to figure out the chord progression that fit that melody best. And most of it I got, but I was stuck on one chord. So I go to Chat GPT. I go, hey, here's the notes I'm singing. What chord progression works with this? It's 2 beats per note. And boom, it didn't just give me one, it gave me a whole bunch. He gave me options. And it says, try all of these and see which one works best and fits the mood of what you're trying to, convey in your song. And to Maya's point, let's say, just play the devil's advocate. Let's say there was a black Viking in history. Let's just pretend.
There could have been, by the way. I mean,
there may have been.
Possible.
If there was, I would hope that AI would know that when they generated the picture, but they would generate several pictures and say, yes, it's not common knowledge that Vikings were black, but there historically really was one. And so you can also kind of learn and look at all the options. Mm-hmm. Just kind of like my guitar chord progression that I got. And that gives you different points of view right there.
Yeah. I think that interaction you had to figure out the best chord progression, that's also a really good illustration of how AI can help, which is that it didn't say, oh, Tim, stand aside, let me write this song. It gave you options, and it's still leaving the judgment to you.
Exactly.
And then you, because you have emotionality and human experience, you can make a judgment about what music expresses emotionally what you're trying to get across. And I don't think that's something a machine will ever really get.
Right.
You don't understand, well, the human experience and the emotionality, and this is what Tim's trying to get across. So here's the perfect notes, Tim.
And it was patiently teaching me, because it teaches you music theory. You can still see a pattern in those different progressions. Yeah. And so it's almost like this super patient teacher.
Yeah.
Because I prompted it and I went to look for it, it's more meaningful when I get that answer, right? So it's a tool. And I'm just learning how to do the prompts, but I'm finding it very useful, and I'm an old boomer, so even if I can do it, you guys can do it.
I think it's an advanced tool. I don't really see it as a replacement for people. Like I said, I think as it gets more advanced and we get closer to the boundary of machine versus human, we'll actually understand, a machine will never do these things for me.
Right. It's interesting. Yes, I like that very much too, because the other day on one of the social media I have an account on, I saw actually a sponsored post about an AI tool for lawyers. And then, so there were so many laughing emojis, and people were just like, I felt, of course, a laughing emoji may mean, a couple of things actually, but I took it like people were just, putting down even, the idea of an AI tool being able to help lawyers, because they were immediately saying with those emoji, at least that's how I took it, that give me a break. How can, an AI tool ever replace a lawyer? And I think that many people, as Tim mentioned in the beginning, many people go to extremes. They just think that, oh, AI is here to replace us, and that's never going to happen. But the
Right.
point is that it's not here to replace anybody. It's not here to replace lawyers. It's not here to replace doctors. It's not here to replace artists, or illustrators, or translators, or whatever. It's here to help, and it's
Yeah.
here, yeah, because it will actually make us more productive if we learn how to use
Right.
AI tools and so on. So,
Exactly.
and I also believe that it is. I mean, this message is not there yet, or because technological companies and tech giants, they're so busy competing because I understand. I mean, from a business perspective, the company that first develops a better AI tool or better AI tools, they're going to get the lion's share of the market. And I understand why everybody's competing there. But at the same time, I think that they should have resources, allocate resources to actually explaining and sending that message out.
Yeah.
Because if the message is not out, they're not going to get that much of a market share because people will just resist,
They won't buy it. Right.
won't
Right. I
buy.
think. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think they are doing, in general, not a very good job of explaining the potential impact and also being honest about the risks. So they have an economic motivation not to highlight the risks, and they have an economic motivation to be really, really optimistic about the potential. And I think what happens is when they describe the potential, they're not doing a particularly great job of connecting to people. So a normal person hears all of this excitement and cheerleading, and they think, I don't know, you're not really speaking my language, so I'm not sure if I can trust you. And then they see stories like, the Google image generator generating these sort of silly images, and they think, oh, you see, it's broken, like it's never going to be trustworthy. And so both of these things together create this dissonance where you hear all of the tech CEOs saying how awesome it is, and then your little real life, experiences of it might not be so awesome. I mean, not everyone is having good experiences. Like Tim having the AI help him find a good chord progression, that's a positive experience. But then there are also negative experiences people are having, and they feel that the tech CEOs and the leaders aren't acknowledging the negative experiences enough.
Yeah, interesting. Again, going back to your angle about the more we have AI, the more exposure, the more that we're going to understand our own humanity. Okay.
Yeah.
And a good example is AI songs that were written totally by AI, right? And I watch a YouTuber, his name's Rick Beato. He's a music guru who, analyzes songs. Really interesting guy. And, he's been, I don't want to say critical, but he's basically been saying when a song is too perfect, listeners feel that, and it feels like there's no humanity, and you don't know why. And what he does is for example, this is even before AI, he analyzes the perfect drum beats that we can all program into our songs, right?
Right.
Never misses a beat, perfect precision, right? And then he plays real classic rock songs, and he says, see how the rhythm is changing, but they're doing it together, and there's this groove, and you feel the humanity, right? So even like people were afraid, there's going to be no more artists. There's no way AI could write something I could write, because only I could write it, So that's another, sometimes we can't define why, but we feel like there's a lack of humanity in this. Emotionally, you're feeling it, but you don't know, you can't put your finger on it.
I agree. I think, poetry is another one where you can ask an AI to write a poem about any subject in any poetry format, and it'll do it. But for me, I read a lot of haikus, for example, and so someone recently got an AI to write a bunch of haikus, and then he wrote one himself, and he challenged everyone, like, pick the one that I wrote. And to me, it was really obvious because the AI haikus were just too they were machine-like. Like you could feel that they were not written by a soul, that they were written.
Yeah. And figuring out why is probably where I'm not at yet, but you just feel it. You just know it.
I'm not there either. I don't know. I can't express exactly how it stuck out, except to say that all of the others, to me, felt like they were the product of a mathematical model, whereas the human written haiku was the product of human experience, a soul having a series of experiences on Earth in a human body, and then expressing some sort of emotional state that came from all of those experiences.
But it's interesting because I think that maybe we need to dive in a little bit into neuroscience here, because we as humans, we don't understand what we're capable of. Actually, we don't have the full picture of our own abilities when it comes to brain and what our brains can do. And maybe even though we are not aware of that, our brains can still discern, the imperfections of our human nature. And well, we feel that because the imperfection is probably, one of the ways to convey an emotion, right? And well, we also know that emotions, they are born in our brains as well, not in our hearts. But the thing is that even though we don't realize that, our brains are much, much better tuned into these differences and into the ways of recognizing them. Because as you said, an AI generated song is perfect. The rhythm is perfect. Everything is perfect. But that's not what we want. That's
Right.
not what
beauty is the imperfection.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's how nature is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Asymmetrical.
Exactly. Yeah.
yes. Yeah. And I think that's what we actually need to recognize and, yes, see and also respect there. So I don't know, but also I always think about, and Eric, because you are the mathematician, you are the engineer here, and I have never been good at those things. But still, AI is basically, it is based on zeros and ones, or am I mistaken?
It's entirely based on math. Yeah, even when it's making a beautiful little video of your cat, it's doing it based on math. Yeah.
Yeah, and that binary thing is probably what makes it what it is. And as,
Yeah. So right now, all of our computing is, well, not all, because you've got quantum computers now, but the computing you get that you use to create, AI-based images and videos or AI poems or anything, that's all, it can be all deconstructed to ones and zeros. Now, we do have quantum computing now, which at some point will be generally available to normal people, like cell phones. It's not there yet. I mean, to have a quantum computer now would be a pretty weird thing. But in 10 years' time, it might actually be pretty common. Quantum computers can deal with states that are other than 0 and 1. But I believe you'll still have this divide. Even with quantum computers, you'll still have a divide between what a machine can do and what a person can do.
Yeah.
So when you lose a good friend, and you're depressed about it, you could have a robot that knows everything about human psychology because it's been taught human psychology, but that robot may not be able to comfort you in the same way as just a good friend who just comes and puts their arm around you and says, "Hey, man, I'm really sorry."
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. I agree. Yeah.
Well, and Yuka just wrote to me, and Yuka, hello, she has
Thank
a question.
People probably can hear me good in Clubhouse, so people know that what stupid question I may be asking, but I'm going to ask anyway. Eric, thank you so much for another interesting session. It's quite a learning. I like to go back to the very beginning of your talk about the Google sort of mishaps. So seems like this like the CNBC and those business stations are all talking about Google, and then why their mishaps. And this is a company that they spent 5 years to before launching the Gmail. So they may have a different CEO, but why they are sort of rushing to introduce the new AI tool, is that the sign of, their fear of their search engines going to be replaced by AI? That's my number question, as far as question number two. And then, sort of with respect to this search engine, our sort of like the finding has been controlled by AI anyway. Now, why we are, of course, it's so true that we have to worry about those ethical and moral issue of AI result, but we were exposed to those sort of AI influence for many, many years. Now, all of a sudden, we are so worried about this. Is that because of the image issue? Those like a fake image, and they may sort of influence the election result. So those are the sort of two very basic questions I have. Thank you. And I'm going to listen to your response in LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuka.
I think that the reason that there's a sudden and heightened concern is directly traceable back to the introduction of ChatGPT by OpenAI, which captured the popular imagination in a way that no other AI tool had done before. But you're right, our lives have been subject to AI for many years. So for example, when your credit card company decides to cut your credit card off because they notice some weird looking transaction, someone bought some fruit in Tanzania and they've never seen you buy anything in Tanzania before. So they decide, you know what, until we speak to you, we're going to just close your credit card down. That's AI doing that. That is not a person. That's AI. It's using an algorithm that belongs to a family of algorithms called classification and clustering, and it's using all the history of your previous purchases to figure out whether your current purchase is really you or not. So that's AI. That's been going on for years behind the scenes, and it didn't attract a lot of attention. Since ChatGPT's been in the market, there's been much more attention. There's been much more public and regular person engagement with AI, and so that's why there's more attention when Google's image generator, fails to satisfy the market. And then why Google? There's a few really interesting things going on here with corporate culture of Google, I think. Firstly, I think you're right. They have realized that this new generative AI technology could completely replace internet search. And that is an existential threat to Google because they are so reliant. If you look at the revenues of Alphabet, they are like something like 90% plus is based on internet search advertising. So if internet search goes away, advertising revenue goes away, company goes away. So I think they're in a big hurry. The other thing is I don't know whether their culture right now has been properly calibrated for high innovation. I think the way advertising revenue goes away. I think they got a little bit addicted to owning the online advertising market for internet search, and maybe they got a little too comfortable. In 2017, their researchers actually discovered the math that runs all of the large language models that we use today. So that was 2017. And for some reason, they just didn't realize what they had discovered. Meanwhile, other companies realized it and turned it into these highly successful products like ChatGPT. So they don't have a brain power deficit at all. They've probably still got a much bigger share of the world's best mathematicians than any other company, but they don't seem to have a culture to turn that into good, fast business innovation at the moment.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Yuka, I hope that this answered your questions. And if you have follow-up questions, let us know. Also, we have a comment from Frank. And
Yeah, I
Frank,
couldn't read it to the end for some reason. I was trying to click and I couldn't find it, but I saw part of it. Go ahead. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so great discussion. I agree with almost everything, but wouldn't say that AI is about perfection. Say in the example of music, AI draws on a data set which will include imperfections. The Beatles were masters at throwing in a surprise chord or even a bum chord.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the comment. Yes.
But and yet, when I listen to AI generated music, I don't feel the humanity. So I don't know what the cause is. I'm just saying, me as a person, subjectively,
Mhm.
and my comment about perfection was more about the rhythms, the beats, like the drum beats that the computer generates. Even that, this is before AI. It was too perfect. And
Mhm.
some people, it just turned them off, but they didn't know why. That was kind of the point. And it wasn't my point. It was actually Rick Beato's point. But
Right.
yeah, I agree. I mean, please comment on that, Eric, because I think it makes a lot of sense what Frank said.
Yeah, so machines don't have the subjectivity of human experience and emotion. So when we listen to music or we listen to a poem, we have a subjective human response based on our own human experiences and our own emotional makeup and psyche. And machines don't have that. So there's no way for them to write music thinking, I wonder, I think that this will make people feel sad, but introspective, you know. Like it has no idea what that stuff even means. All it can do is look at its training data set and say, you asked me to write a country song about losing a girlfriend, so here's what that sounds like.
Yeah.
But it has no concept of what the emotionality of the art is or what the emotional response is going to be from people. And so, yes, you can engineer a training data set to have all sorts of very weird chord progressions and unusual things. And if you do that, then when you ask an AI to write a song, it will look at that training data set and it might come up with things that are weird and unusual, but it's not thinking, oh, this will be very interesting to people. The discordance of this music will make them feel a certain way. It has no idea that that's what the effect is going to be. It just says the training data set looks like this. They asked for this. I'm just going to replicate it.
And to that point, like even when I go in and I try to generate images from Bing, I do a trial and error with different prompts to try to get something close to what I want. And sometimes I'll just keep refreshing it with the same prompts and I get completely different images.
So that's the nature of neural networks. You can ask it the exact same thing, 2 times in a row, and you will get different responses. That's how neural networks behave.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll get, out of 30 options, I'll finally find one that I like.
Right. So, right. It is actually worth pressing refresh. If you don't like what you see, just try exactly the same thing. See what it does. Yeah.
Or, I might tweak it a little bit. Like the example I give, this was a while back. I was talking about retired husband syndrome in Japan. I was trying to make it just kind of a lighthearted post. And I created an image. It was like one of the first images. And, I wanted the Japanese wife to be behind the husband with her arms crossed and, angry.
Yeah. I remember that image.
And I kept, it kept giving me these images, but she was wearing shoes in the house,
Right.
Right. And then I think it was Tomoko or maybe it was Yuka. I don't know. But one of my Japanese friends said to me, try prompting in Japanese and see how it works. So I tried that, and it did work, but I don't have a big data set to know. But just stuff like that was really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I have a quick question. Sorry. Can a machine learn to be imperfect? At least it can pretend to be imperfect?
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah, if you mean by imperfection, for example, that it might compose some music where chord progressions, not following the exact musical theory of how chord progressions should work. Sure, yeah, you can teach it that. It's that is all about the training data set. And specifically what I'm talking about is neural network-based generative AI, because that's what the conversation seems to be about right now. You could also write just purely a music composition AI, and you could certainly teach it to write music in a certain style that feels to humans to be imperfect.
I wonder if it could be taught to break the rules, because that's what we're talking about, and still sound good. To me, like that's the sweet spot. You can break
Yeah.
sound terrible. I do it all the time, right? But
yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of AI researchers are trying to get as close to that as possible, because for some reason, you know, the AI companies really want their AIs to be as human-like as possible. Now, I'm not even sure why they're doing that. Why not have, you know, an engineer that never makes mathematical mistakes? You know, human engineers make mistakes. Why not have one that doesn't ever make a mathematical mistake? That seems pretty awesome to me. But no, the AI companies seem to want their AIs to be super, super human-like. So there is this push towards getting them to be more human-like, which means introducing things that feel like human foibles or human error. And so there's various engineering methodologies to do that, like increasing, you know, the randomness of output in a neural network. But that is still using engineering to try and replicate a non-engineering aspect of human nature.
yeah.
Okay, Eric, sorry. So I've noticed that, you know, the same prompt, and then Gemini and ChatGPT gives me sometimes completely different responses.
Mm-hmm.
Gemini tend to be more PC, and ChatGPT try to be cute.
Okay.
Is that like their program to reach or search the different data set and then come back with the different type of responses? It's just so different programming. Is that it? Sometimes it's shocking, the difference in the responses.
Yeah. So those differences are because of very broadly two things: the training data set and the configuration of the model, or which, you know, you could call the programming of the model. So the training data set, I think it's pretty obvious like why that would influence the model. That's how the model learns about the world, is you just feed it a bunch of data about the world. So if you feed it a bunch of you know, humorous takes on you know, I don't know, any subject, then when you ask it about that subject, it's more likely to come up with something that looks like a humorous take. The configuration of the model, though, that's really important as well. So if you think of the model as, you know, you stick input into the model and then the model produces output. And that model is usually a neural network. Well, almost always it's a neural network for the generative AI. You can fiddle with how the neural network works. That's a really common way to do it. What Google probably did in these latest, you know, issues with image generation is it starts fiddling with the output of the network as well. And that's where it gets to be problematic, right? Because now that's where the equivalent is, you know, you take the car that comes off the production line and just stick it into an industrial press to make it shorter, rather than re-engineering the car.
Yeah. You talk about human error, which, you know, that's to be human is to err, right? I mean, the thing is, we are real intelligence capable. We're learning machines.
Yeah.
Right? So one, we can learn from our mistakes, and I'm assuming AI maybe can, but we can also make mistakes and discover something new and useful that we would never have discovered had we based it on our own devices, you know. Can AI make a mistake and then discover something new and learn from it?
In theory, yeah, but in practice, there's been some research that suggests that is incredibly hard to do at the same level as a human child.
Yeah.
So there was one paper that I read recently where the researcher had said, look, I'm not sure what this means, but it's super interesting that the complexity of these models, the emergent complexity, is so high because it suggests we may not have the computing power in the world to really make a machine learn.
That's so interesting.
And so he used the illustration of how basically there is a mathematical fractal nature to the complexity of these models. And the I guess the implication is that if it's that complex, we may not ever get the machine to learn in the same way that like a 7-year-old child learns by just looking at the world, tripping over things, touching things that are too hot that shouldn't be touching, or interacting with dangerous animals that it shouldn't interact with. Like, children can learn these things. Actually, so can puppies, right? Puppies can learn these things too. And it just may be beyond the machines that we know how to make.
Yeah.
Maybe on some more advanced planet with more advanced tech, they're making machines.
Yeah.
But we seem not to know how to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me read out another question to you, Eric. So further to music, what about voice recognition? Please tell us something about the use of AI that emulates someone's voice. Is this a possibility?
Yeah.
Can we
Yes.
manage this? This is from Diana Green. Yes.
Thank you, Diana.
Yeah. So this is actually a field of AI where it's gotten pretty good, meaning that you can mathematically deconstruct the sound waves produced by a certain person's voice and reconstruct their voice in such a convincing and high fidelity way that no human can really tell the difference. So yes, it's a possibility. Actually, it's a reality now. And how do we manage it? That's a really good question that hasn't been solved yet. So this is one of the problems with AI in general, is we tend to race ahead, build something very clever, and then realize, uh-oh, that actually might be problematic.
Yeah.
Kind of like, inventing super advanced weapons and then realizing, wait a minute, if everyone has those weapons, that might not be a very good thing.
Yeah, I mean, visually, the deep fakes are getting better and better, and those, like, at what point, we're kind of almost at the point now where everything you see, you got to say, unless you have a tool to analyze it.
Yeah.
You almost have to assume it's not true now.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever get. I mean, there may be an arms race between the tools that make the deep fakes and the tools that find the deep fakes, but that to me means the best policy as a person is just be very careful what you trust. The audio fakes of people's voices are so good now that most people are not going to know.
I'm going to know.
And is there a tool that can spot it? I'm not sure, honestly. Again, there might be an arms race between tools that make fake voices and tools that detect fake voices, but it puts people in this position where they just have to be super careful about what they trust. This is where the critical thinking comes in.
Right.
So if you get a voice message saying, hey, Mum, I've been kidnapped by some Russian terrorists, but they'll release me if you pay them $10 million in Bitcoin into this account. It's the critical thinking that comes in to say, is that really likely? How likely is it that my child has actually been kidnapped by Russian terrorists? And what can I do in response to this that wouldn't kill my child if it's true, but would actually test out whether it's true?
Right. Yes, indeed. And also, to this point, Eric, I think that once again, we have to be very careful what information we disclose online, because we have been quite complacent, I believe. The majority of people, not everybody, of course, but, talking about personal life and, patterns, everyday patterns and routines and so on. And maybe this is the time when we really have to reconsider what we do online and how we talk online, what we say online as well, because that's probably that information could be used. And even sometimes I should say that, in my neighborhood, there is a sign that it is a poster actually, that it's in Japanese, of course, because I live here in Tokyo, but the poster reads, "Damasarenai hito wa inai," which means everybody can be tricked or everybody can be duped into believing something. And that poster has been put up everywhere on every corner here by the police, actually, because there's a lot of, denwa sagi. I don't know, in Japanese, these are the phone calls, fake phone calls, just as you said. They call an elderly person, a woman, and they say, "Oh, Mom, I have been kidnapped," or something like that, or "I need to go to hospital." And maybe, of course, we have to be critical thinkers, but before we become critical thinkers, and I mean, or not even simultaneously, we really have to reconsider how we behave online as well.
True, yeah. And I noticed Diana asked a follow-up question saying, do we need to set up personal words with family to know it's our family? You know, basically code words. Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Right. Yes, it is indeed. And also, Eric, I wanted to ask you because that's another thing that another part of the discussion about AI. So all the technical giants are rushing to create their AI models, Gen AI models, based on all the data that is available out there. But at the end of the day, in order for those tools to be useful to different businesses and corporations and different people, if you like, artists and so on, they'll have to be probably specialized.
Yep.
So what are the trends there? Could you please give us just an overview of how things are developing now and what we can expect in
That
this?
is the exact trend. The trend is towards more specialized, narrower models that might be specialized to just know about one company or one industry. And so these models are just smaller. They have less parameters in them. They are dealing with smaller training data sets because people don't need them to know about everything. They just need them to know about the HR policies of this company. So it's now possible for non-programmers to make these kinds of models. OpenAI actually has one of the better tool sets for making these models. So if, let's say you have a 100-person company and you have, I don't know, like a 200-page HR manual with all of your HR policies, you could feed that manual into an AI, and now anyone, you know, joining your company can ask the AI questions like, you know, on day one, like, am I allowed to take a day off on day two? Is that allowed? What if I'm 3 years in? How many days off in a row can I take? And you can have the AI just tell you what the answer is. So imagine how much time that saves your HR person. So that's a trend right now, is narrower models and more specific models that are just trained to be one thing. Now, you can't ask that model about how to fix your motorcycle, right? It won't know. It's not trained on that. It's just trained on, you know, I'm sorry, but I only answer questions about the HR policies of your company.
Right.
Not my job. Yeah.
Yeah. So so that's a trend, and I see a lot of companies in the space building for that trend. The other thing there is the security aspect, where a company says, I want to make sure that no one else can access my data. So when I train this AI in, I don't know, the designs of my MRI machines, I don't want my MRI building competitor to access all my blueprints. So that's also a trend where people are hosting these models on their own secured infrastructure.
So I got a question, because I feel like AI now is the ultimate Swiss Army knife. You know, like it's like we don't even know the potential that it has, right? And maybe the market now is going to figure it out. As you know, we're going to figure it out as we go along. My question is, like, how much of these potential applications are being pushed onto us versus what are people using it for? Like, what,
Yeah.
you know, and
it's more a journey of discovery. It's a pull versus a push. So
yeah,
you have a lot of AI companies saying, hey, everyone, here's 20 use cases that you should do right now. But that sort of ideation of use cases is actually coming more from third parties, like consultants. Like, you'd be more likely to get something like that from Accenture or McKinsey than you would from OpenAI at the moment.
okay,
But I think the AI companies will start to get into that game because it serves their interests to have more use cases discovered for their tools. But most of the use case ideation is coming from consultants right now. The companies that make the AIs are focused very much on just making them better, faster, more powerful, more like people, things like that.
okay, yeah. Yeah, for me, I'm learning by listening to other people's stories, like reading all your posts on LinkedIn. If they come on my feed, I read them because we need more people like you. It's coming so fast now. If you go on YouTube, every day there's, this great new AI tool. Like, I can't keep up with all that.
Yeah.
I need people like you to kind of guide me where I want to go. And I think I may have posted, let you guys know about this, but this guy wrote on LinkedIn, he did a post and he said when ChatGPT came out, they had a big meeting at school, a big hullabaloo about, oh my God, the sky is falling and we don't want these kids cheating using ChatGPT. He immediately went home and he programmed his ChatGPT not to give his kid any answers.
Yeah.
And to guide him and give him options or avenues to look stuff up. And he said, ChatGPT is now the best tutor he's ever had because it never gets frustrated and his kid is like totally engaged in it. And as a parent, he's homeschooled. I think he said he was homeschooling. I may have, but he used it as a tool to fit the needs. And so rather than resisting it like the teachers at school were suggesting, he embraced it and found actually a very positive way to do it. When I read stories like that, it gives me hope and it gives me ideas like, oh my goodness, I never thought of that,
Yeah, and we're still at such an early stage for generative AI, which is the tools like ChatGPT, that we probably haven't discovered more than 1% of the way they can be used. They're also getting better every day, literally. So I also am optimistic from that perspective where, yes, we're going to run into some problems, but we're also going to discover all sorts of very positive potential uses, like, for example, making them into tutors for children where the tutor has infinite patience. That's a really good example of what you can do with it versus just a cheating tool where, it'll just tell you the answer to something that you were supposed to figure out yourself through first principle or something.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And then there is one question, Eric, about the paper you mentioned earlier. So Konrad Chan, he said, may I learn about the name and the authors of the paper you mentioned?
Sure, yeah. I did a LinkedIn post about it, which I will, what I'll do, Maya, is I'll send a LinkedIn message to you with a link to that post.
Yes.
And then you can distribute it to whoever you want.
I will do that. Yes.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate that very much.
And definitely follow Eric if you're not. Follow him on LinkedIn. He's like really one of the best creators in my opinion right now. I love him. He'll add to your feed, I promise.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so very much, Eric. We are 2 minutes before 9 o'clock, so we'll have to wrap it up. But also, Eric, I would like to invite you, for another session, maybe in a month or two, because there is so much to talk about this, and I'm sure that at that point there will be new things that have come up.
No doubt.
Yes, and it is really educational for me to follow you on LinkedIn, but to talk with you as well here. So once again, really thank you so very much for coming here, being our speaker today. And to everybody, as Tim said, please connect with Eric on LinkedIn and follow him. There is so much to learn from his posts there.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Can I?
Yes.
Can I
go ahead?
Confirm what he just said? He said we only know the 1% of AI's capability. Did he say that or?
Yeah, that's my estimate. Is that it's so early in our evolution, in AI's evolution, and in our experience of AI, that we have probably discovered less than 1% of what it could be used for.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because I was just thinking, I only know the 1% of Excel, and then now that do I have to learn like 99%?
That's actually a pretty good analogy. I mean, Excel is incredibly powerful, and most people who use it probably know less than 1% of what it can do.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuka. Always appreciate your questions. And well, that's all for today. To everybody who stuck with us, we were happy to have you with us. Thanks a lot for this. Please, if you haven't followed us, follow us or subscribe to the YouTube channel, because we'll be here, well, every next week. Not every next week, every week actually.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot for that. And well, have a great day. It's a beautiful day here. Still a little bit windy, but it's beautiful anyway. Okay,
And
that's all.
Eric, hurry up and come to Japan and visit us. We want to meet you.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Thank you very much for having me on the show again. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone's questions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.